For this episode of Under the Puppet, we're doing something a little different. We are headed out of the studio to conduct some interviews, sort of documentary style, with several of the performers of the Los Angeles Guild of Puppetry's recent Puppetzilla Puppet Slam Astrology, What's Your Sign? We'll then chat about what goes into putting on a successful puppet slam with Puppetzilla Puppet Slam producer Christine Papalexis. It all happens on this episode of Under the Puppet.
You're listening to Saturday Morning Media. And now, back to our show. Welcome to the show that is preserving puppetry through the personal stories of professional puppeteers. My name is Grant Pachoco, and this is Under the Puppet.
I first spoke to Kelsey Cotto and Teague Skihan about their slam piece, Pisces.
So Kelsey, can you tell me a little bit about your puppetry career up to this point?
So I studied musical theater at UCLA, and I auditioned for a show that had puppets and also like in-person actors in it. And I auditioned for the in-person parts, but they said, no, do you want to do the puppets? And I said, yes. And I've kind of fallen in love with puppets ever since. So I did that. I did Little Shop of Horrors at Pasadena Playhouse in 2019. And then that's how I met Rogue Artists Ensemble, which is a theater company that I do puppets with. And then I got a job at the Skirball Cultural Center, which is where I met Teague, through folks that I heard that they had an opening there through folks at the company, and I applied there. And so that's where I do puppets most of the time, is at the Skirball.
Yeah, the Skirball has like a big puppet festival, right?
They do, yes. Actually, Teague and I were in a huge 4-person elephant puppet. We were at the helm of that this spring, which was very fun.
Excellent. Well, Teague, let's talk a little bit about your career. How did you get to puppets?
Absolutely. Well, I think it all started when I did a middle school production of Little Shop of Horrors. I think Little Shop is a gateway drug for a lot of us. And then from that point on, I worked through some various things. And then I had the pleasure of finding out about Rogue Artists Ensemble as well. Me and Kelsey are fellow rogues, but funny enough, the first time we met was at the Skirball. And through working with Rogue, I learned more things, developed more things, and during that process, I started working at the Mouse, and I worked at the entertainment department with Mr. Cheese himself. And so I did a lot of character work there. I debuted a few articulated characters as well as opened their big space-themed area.
Let's talk about the slam, because that's what we're here to talk about. And Kelsey, you developed this piece that we're going to see tonight. Can you tell us just how it developed, how you came up with it, and maybe a little bit about it? We don't want any spoilers, but...
Yes, I love fish. And I have been thinking and dreaming about making a big old fish puppet for a really long time. And I used the astrology theme as an excuse to do a Pisces act. And so I really had the idea of the puppet first, and then kind of developing the act around how the puppet moves well and what they can do together. My favorite thing about the act is that I had the bare idea and the puppets made, and I invited Teague into the process, and we developed the movement vocabulary together. I think that's the strength of it, is that we built it together as a team. I think that's the act in a nutshell.
Actually, Teague, could you talk a little bit about the puppets? Because I got to see them, and they're really amazing, beautiful looking puppets. And can you maybe talk about how they operate and how you use them?
Yeah, absolutely. They are beautifully created puppets. Kelsey created them using sculpture mesh as well as embroidery hoops to help create the body of the fish, and the whole thing is held together by elastic beads and a liberal amount of hot glue, as all puppets
as always,
should be. And it's a really fluid, simple puppet that's just puppeteered through gestures. There's no mechanisms, there's no strings or pulleys to pull. It is just really me and Kelsey's movement being directed into the fish, and with some help from some flexible pieces of fabric, there's some wonderful, natural, organic fluid movement just built into these fish that really makes them feel like they float through the air, and that everyone who sees them being performed almost feels like they are underwater watching something from a perspective that they would never normally see.
Excellent. Well, I'm very excited to see it. And these fish puppets have lights inside of them as well, right?
They do, yes. I think another aspect of what I wanted to achieve with this act was to have as simple tech as possible. I wanted the challenge of, can I have an act where it's lights down, music ends, lights up? You know, something just with as minimal cues as possible. And so to have the idea of like, oh, let's have them be practically lit, and maybe that will also help with their direct manipulation puppets. So to help further the illusion that would otherwise be afforded by a rod or a string, to have them in complete darkness. I thought that would help. So we'll see how it goes. It'll be fun.
Awesome. I'm very excited. Is this the first time you'll be performing this piece?
Yeah, it will be the first time we're performing this piece. We had a bit of a practice run thanks to some of the wonderful people we work with up at the Skirball. They allowed us to just perform it in front of a few coworkers as well as a few extra guests that we had who were in the Noah's Ark exhibit that both me and Kelsey work at and puppeteer at. And so we had some surprise guests see a little bit of a preview as well as some of our coworkers. But this is the first time the whole piece has been fully put together in a space where it belongs.
Fantastic. Well, I'm very excited to see it. And just break a leg and have a really great show.
Next, I spoke with Ricky Chavez about his piece, I Only Have Eyes for You.
Well, Ricky, I'm so excited to talk to you about your performance here tonight at the Puppetzilla Puppet Slam. Is this your first Puppet Slam, or have you done Slam before?
This is my second Slam, and technically my second live performance as well. So I'm really excited.
Excellent. And the first one you did, was it the same act, or is this something completely new?
It was a different act, but it's still, I'm living in the Henson puppetry style operation. So last one was primarily live hand sack, and this is different live hand sack.
Excellent. I can't wait to see it. Can you talk a little bit about how you came to the world of puppetry?
I was someone who watched a lot of Sesame Street as a kid, but it didn't have an impact to me where I knew I wanted to do that my whole life. I ended up doing music. I studied jazz music. That's like what my background is. And now I work in film production, largely for covering music. And I just came a lot of productions online, like Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, and a couple other things where I just thought it'd be fun to like capture those and do those. But eventually it's like, I should be trying this. And so it's really hands-on. I shot a music video with some friends at Bob Baker right when I started making puppets last October, and then met Esty, who's here tonight, and she told me about the guild, and she's like, you should try something. So we built puppets, we built a show, did that, it was a blast, and now I'm just trying to put puppets anywhere I can.
Excellent. And can you tell us a little bit about your show tonight? You know, maybe you don't want to spoil everything for people who eventually see your act, but what's your show like tonight?
The world I've kind of been living in right now is I really like, so like I said, I come from a jazz background, and I love doing things in music. Music is home base for me. So my last show, I did sync with my hand. This time I really wanted to challenge myself to do like live vocal performance. So I'm singing, I'm gonna try tell some jokes, do some fun stuff for a little bit, but it's to a song. I really like the old Henson style acts where they took jazz standards and kind of added a funny twist to it based on those lyrics. So both of my acts have kind of lived in that realm. So I'm doing I Only Have Eyes for You, which has been covered a billion times. And I'm kind of throwing in some gags based off of eyes and eyeballs. So I have some eyeballs growing out, and I have a weird little monster, but the whole premise of the show is eyes.
Excellent. How long did it take you to develop this?
I was looking for an idea, and I went through versions of it, but once I had this idea, it happened in a day, like that, the fleshed out idea, and then it was a matter of making it technically executable. So for me, like I'm still a baby puppeteer. I started in October, and been just trying to push myself to grow and like perform in more spaces. So this one was that I was able to build this puppet in about 2 days, and then I spent like 2 or 3 days of just prototyping and figuring out how I could do all this by myself. So like triggering some sound cues, using the effects. So in total, probably like a full week's worth of work, but it was fragmented.
Excellent. Well, I'm very excited to see it. What's the one piece of your slam piece where you're just like, once I get past this, it's all gravy? Like this is the trickiest part, but once I get past it, it's all good.
Setting up the technicalisms of like making sure everything plays, my wireless is good, is challenging, but there's a list to it. That there's one first reveal where I introduce a second thing with my left hand while I'm singing and performing, and I'm really hoping that reveal reads the way it has been during my own rehearsals. And once that's done, the rest is just gonna happen. Like that's a good part also about not going to a track, is like if I want to say something else, I do have the option to do that, and I need a riff or ad lib, I have that. So I maybe should be more nervous, but I'm not. I feel good about it.
Excellent. Well, Ricky, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Next, I spoke with Puppet Slam newcomer Raresh Fota about his shadow piece, Newton's Apple.
Raresh, I would love to know about your path to puppetry. How did you find puppetry?
It's a very random story. I am a student at UCLA. I study physics, but I'm also a theater minor, fun enough. And I took this one very funky class called Special Problems in Acting Techniques. And I thought it was going to be a stage fighting class, and apparently it was puppetry. So I would like to say, tricked into taking puppetry, but I've been loving it ever since.
Yeah, puppets are a special problem. And what was the name of the class? That sounds like...
Right?
Yeah.
It's a fantastic name.
Yeah.
It's called Special Problems in Acting Techniques.
Yes, there you go. Puppetry. That's
Truly.
well defined. So let's talk about this slam. Have you ever performed in a slam before?
I have not. First time.
And what made you decide, like, this is it? This is the one I'm going to perform in?
Ooh, my professor from that class, Perry Daniel, is currently the co-president of the LA Guild. So she introduced me to a lot of events that were organized by the Guild. And when I saw the Puppetry Slam, I realized it was the perfect opportunity for me to finally perform live as a college student. I've not done it before.
Excellent. Well, and is this act something you've performed before, or did you create this act for this show?
I created this piece for that class. It was my final project. And Perry was very supportive, and people quite enjoyed it. So I decided to finesse it a bit and to perform it in front of a much larger audience.
Excellent. Can you tell us a little bit about what style of puppetry it is, and maybe not the whole story, but like the log line. What's the piece about?
It is a shadow play piece about the myth of an apple falling on Newton's head. That being, colloquially the birth of physics.
Right.
So I decided to combine my love for physics and my love for theater and performing arts and puppetry into this one piece about Newton.
Excellent. And how long did it take you to develop this piece?
I would say about 3 weeks on and off.
And have you performed it for the class? Have you performed it anywhere else?
I have not.
Will this be the first time before a general audience?
Absolutely.
What is the trickiest thing about your piece? Like, what's the one thing where you're like, as long as I can get this down, then it's great?
Well, it's a one-man show. It's a one-man piece.
Right.
And I've included some electric circuitry to help me change the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And that is very tricky because I have not only to handle puppets and to make them come alive, but I have also to press buttons at the same time and make sure that the set changes are on point all on my own. So it's incredibly challenging to keep track of so many puppets and so many objects and so many shapes, but to also have fun with it. So that's what I need to. If I press those buttons at the right time, I'm going to have a fantastic time.
Excellent. Well, Raresh, I'm very excited to see your piece, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Of course, loved it. Thank you for talking to me.
I then spoke with Josie Oriana about her hand and rod puppet piece, Dame Beehive Brucey's Reluctant Astrology Advisement.
Josie, you are going to be performing tonight at the Puppetzilla Puppet Slam. Can you tell a little bit about your career, your path to puppetry? How did you become a puppeteer?
I've had a long passion for puppetry as well as like theater and film. And I didn't take the leap into puppetry until I was doing my master's degree in London, and I was during quarantine. And I wrote a comedy musical that I had had on the stage one time with humans, but I was feeling very stifled and suffocated because I couldn't be on the stage with people. So with that, I decided to build all of my characters into marionettes. And then I became part of the British Puppet Guild. And then things started to open up a little bit. And I made my first Muppet and then continued to study different ways to write for that and so forth. And so I've written another musical that I think would be 100% the best just for puppets and marionettes, whereas the other one could be played by humans or whatever. But I've returned to Los Angeles and joined the Puppet Guild here and was thrown into the opportunity to do the Puppet Slam. Meanwhile, I was building some other marionettes at home, and I write a comedic astrology column for a small newspaper in the middle of New Mexico. And my pen name for that is Dame Beehive Brucey. And she's a taciturn, reluctant astrologer. And so when it came to this puppet slam being what is your sign, I thought I'm going to make a puppet based off of that pen name.
Yeah.
And so now she exists outside of me, which is such a relief, because then I hope to also put her into videos or whatever else, reading the things that I write. And then I'm slotted to start writing for the Puppet Guild publication and that same character.
Oh, excellent. That's awesome. So how long this act that you're performing tonight, have you performed it before, or will this be the first time?
This will be the first time. This character took a lot of work. She was really difficult to build. I built her all myself, and I'm really proud of her. And I got all of the materials for her by going to a charity shop called Remainders. And Remainders is in Pasadena, and I found every material that I needed for her. And she came together magically, like most puppets and marionettes do. And so today is her debut.
Excellent. Well, it's funny because one of my characters existed before he was a puppet as well. So it's really interesting to, I think, to have a character that, you had this character that you were writing in their voice for a while before they even became a puppet. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
Excellent. How many times have you rehearsed this, or are you ready to go?
Well, I always feel like there's surprises anytime we go on stage, and so I've left myself space for error and also for ad lib, because she's sort of that type of character, and I felt like I would be doing her and myself a disservice by having it completely down pat, because it is a slam, and it's more fun that way. Whereas, like, if you're doing something for television or theater or film and you have to meet certain marks and lines at a certain time, then things can become a little bit more confined. So I've left it a little bit more open.
Is this the first slam you've performed in?
Yes. And I love this Puppet Guild. Everybody's very nice and supportive, and we have a lot of fun. And I'm just getting to know everybody, and I love the level of creativity and support that this group has.
Yeah, it's a really great group. I also wanted to ask you about the British Puppetry Guild. What was that experience like, and what are there any differences? Are there any like comparisons, or are they just as full of camaraderie like we are?
Definitely full of the same camaraderie, and I think that overall puppets are appreciated differently all over in Europe more, and obviously the UK is no longer part of that. But I was living there during Brexit, but the appreciation. Like my marionettes are clowns. Nobody's scared of clowns over there. It's a very American thing.
Yeah.
And same with puppets. There's not this fear. So it's sort of a different kind of embracing. And then also there's ancient relations to all puppets and clowns worldwide. It's not just Europe, right? But I think everything that I did with them was all on Zoom or online, and was just through emails, because everything was still shut down because of quarantine.
Right.
But I still receive invites and everything, and they do a similar thing where they interview, and they also do a lot of writing, and they have a publication quarterly as well.
Yeah, I'm a member of the British Puppetry Guild. They're awesome. Yep,
Cool.
absolutely.
That's funny.
Have a great show. Have a great performance. Break a leg, and just have fun.
Thank you so much.
I then spoke to Ben Gown and Marie-Claire Macadar about their piece, The Month of Elul.
Well, Ben, I would love to know what was sort of your path to puppetry? Like, what got you into puppets, and that led you all the way to here tonight performing at the Puppet Slam?
Sure. I was mostly a musician. Started piano when I was young, picked up the accordion when I was 20, and I do all kinds of music. I'm mostly a musician. Jewish music, Brazilian music, funk, soul, hip hop. I love music. And I conduct youth orchestras and stuff. And then I was getting my master's at the time, and I was working at a preschool as a music specialist, and they had an awesome art supply closet, and I started making little devices that I could pull out of my pocket and make the kids smile. And then I booked some gigs, like some family music gigs. And I booked one with a partner, and he bailed out last minute. And I was like, I'll just make myself a substitute. And I made like a giant orca whale that I could sit next to and play accordion and pull a string, and it would talk. And it had like a spout, it could spout some water. And I loved making that. I couldn't sleep at night. I was excited, to get up the next day, and kind of when the eyes were gluing, and just that. I think it's kind of, I've always thought it's kind of weird, kind of funny. I'm like, okay, I'm a puppeteer, but it's very compelling to me.
Yeah. And so have you done a lot of puppet slams before?
I did one in Seattle. I'm from Seattle. I did one in Seattle a long time ago. And I did one, the Puppetzilla, like Halloween one during the pandemic for the LA Guild here. And that's it. This is my third one, I guess.
And how long have you been developing the piece that you're going to put up tonight?
Oh, like 2 weeks. Me and Marie Claire, we put it together for a gig we had on Thursday this week. That was like for at a Yiddish book center downtown. So I kind of wrote it for that and asked Marie Claire to do it with me. And luckily they said yes.
You have been able to perform it once already earlier this week. Have there been any tweaks before tonight? You're like, now that you've had it up in front of an audience, you're like, oh, you know what? We can switch this. We can nerd.
Yeah, we tweak. I mean, like the audio is not working tonight. Okay, we'll do without the audio. And like we had a little, shadow puppetry we're going to do. It's not working. Okay, we'll do without that, And it's nice when you can do a piece more than once for sure.
Yeah.
I've had traveling acts before where like we do a show and then get back in the car and drive to the next, in the car, you hash it out and you can like tweak it and refine it. And that's awesome when you, do the same piece more than once. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is the second time, hopefully it's a little more polished than it.
Being a musician, how important is music to this piece?
That's a good question. There's some music in it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, there's like some hip hop, some spoken word, and some. I asked the pianist here if I could sit down and play his keys, and he said yes. So I'll do some music, and I did make a little backtrack, but like I said, the audio is not working, so that's okay.
How do you think your background in music helps your puppetry?
I think it's really important. That's why I wanted to work with Marie Claire because I came to the slam and saw them, and I was like, that person is musical, and so I think like rhythm and melody and harmony, but no, like, having a musical sense, in terms of like, I think music and puppetry go very nice together. And so then as you're doing music, there's a visual dimension to the performance that you might as well take advantage of and work with, develop.
Excellent. Well, what can you tell us about the piece that we're going to see tonight?
Okay. It's about the Jewish month of Elul. The Hebrew calendar is based on the moon. There's a new moon that just started yesterday. And so the month of Elul just started yesterday. And during the month of Elul, this is the month that precedes the high holidays, Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah. And during that month, you're supposed to do self-reflection and set yourself up for where you want to, aim yourself towards where you want to go. And so you reflect like, where do I want to go? Who do I want to be? And so that process of self-reflection in Hebrew is called a Feshbon HaNefesh. And when we did this gig on Thursday, they asked us to just to prepare a piece that was about that. We did. So it's sort of like that. And it's like the end of Yom Kippur. There's this prayer called Ne'ilah, which it's the end. Finally, you've been fasting all day. Everybody's hungry. You're like annoyed. You're tired. And you got to stand for this prayer. And they have this visual of like the gates are closing. You got to get your prayers in before the gates close. Everybody's like, you got to get. And so like, I just came up with okay, there's like a gatekeeper and like individuals approach the gates and they plead their case to be written in the book of life, which is a blessing that a lot of people say for like, you should be written in the book of life, for the next year.
And did you build the puppets for this piece?
Most of them. Marie Claire made one of them, but I had a lot of them because I'm producing a musical, actually. I've been producing a musical with puppetry that's actually going to come out soon.
Excellent. Well, we'll look forward to that as well. Ben, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you, man. Pleasure.
Marie Claire, I would love to know about your path to puppetry. How did you discover puppets that got you on the road to lead you to be performing here tonight?
That's a great question and a fun story. So I was in university studying fine arts, and I was majoring in fibers and textiles. I had not taken any puppetry classes or anything like that. And two of my professors literally took me aside one day and had a puppet intervention. And they were like, we're pretty sure you're a puppeteer. Here are the reasons why. Your work is all performative. You build sets for everything. And you're in all your pieces. And I was like, oh, I think you might be right. So one of those professors, this was in Baltimore, and one of those professors actually invited me to a puppet slam in Baltimore called the Puppet Slam, which she was emceeing it. I went, I immediately fell in love and decided I was going to perform at the next one, and I did. And now I've made 10 original short puppet pieces, and basically all I do is perform at Puppet Slam, so it's my favorite thing.
That is amazing. What style of puppets, or do you do different styles of puppets?
I started with all different styles of puppets because I'd had no education in it. I really wanted each piece to be an exploration of a different kind of puppet so I could see what I liked. So I started with object puppetry, and then I did large cardboard flat puppetry. I did shadow puppetry, and now what I really love to do is actually overhead projector shows. So it's a lot of people who use overhead projectors are doing shadow puppetry, but what I do is actually create illustrations on transparencies and create movement with those. And every show is a short musical, so the song is the narrative thread, and the images kind of are a visual of the song itself.
Amazing. So you've performed at a lot of different slams. What advice do you have for someone who is just like starting out? What's one piece of advice to maybe help make that first piece of theirs a little bit easier?
This is a great question. I wish I could tell everyone. I have 2 pieces of advice. Is that okay?
Sure, please.
The first piece of advice is if you know people who do puppetry, ask questions. I found that most people who are puppeteers are so welcoming and so willing to answer and help. Anytime I've done that, I've learned so much. So if you're interested, ask for help. And also, just try making a piece that you will enjoy making and performing. Because just like in any medium, it's so easy to think, what will the audience like? And I still find myself doing that. But I find that when I focus in on enjoying the process and enjoying the end product, I make work that I like more and other people like more too.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. And I'm very excited to see the piece you're working on tonight.
Thank you. I'm excited to do it.
After that, I spoke with veteran puppeteer Freddie Spencer about his marionette piece, Jilly, the Queen of Fremont Street.
All right, Freddie, you're performing tonight in the Puppetzilla Puppet Slam. Can you tell us a little bit just about your history? Because you've done tons of live shows in your career.
Quite a few, I guess, over the years. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, a lot of puppeteers started when they were that young. My father was a magician and a puppeteer. I got into puppetry through my dad. And during the period of the early 50s, marionettes were the big thing. And I gravitated towards marionettes and did very well with it and started performing in my father's shows and then gradually moved on to other venues. And when I was 18, I was hired by Sid and Marty Krofft to perform at the World's Fair, 65 World's Fair, with Les Poupées de Paris.
How was that show? Because we've talked about that show on the podcast, and we just had Sid Krofft was on the show, chatting with him. So can you tell us a little bit about that show? How many shows a day did you do? What was your part in that show?
You know, the funny thing about it was my dad and I went to see Sid and Marty perform Les Poupées de Paris at the York Theater in New York in '63. And, of course, I was just floored. A very well-known puppeteer at the time was the lead puppeteer in the show, Jerry Hartnett. And Jerry told me about them being at the York Theater and that they were looking for people to hire on for the World's Fair. And so we went to see the show. And, of course, I was just, whoa, taken away. After the show, I met with Marty and Sid. And Sid says, okay, well, let me see you walk a puppet across the stage. Well, of course, I was used to short strings. So they were on catwalks that were like 10 or 11 feet up. But I made it happen. I made something happen because they liked what they saw. And they said, yeah, maybe so. Maybe we'll bring you in. I don't know. You know what? It didn't happen right away.
Yeah.
So it took like a few months, but I finally got a letter from Marty and said that they wanted to bring me into the World's Fair show.
And how many shows a day were you doing at the World's Fair?
We were doing 8 to 10 shows a day.
Yeah.
And they were an hour-long show. So it was quite grueling.
But I always look at things like that. It's like you become bulletproof. Practicing that much. Like, people always say, what is it, 100,000 hours or 10,000 hours to get really good at something? You're putting in that work there.
Yeah, the hours can get to you, but what I found out over the years, it's all about the love. You have to love what it is you're doing, whether it's the performance or the show. There's got to be something there that draws you to spending that much time in front of an audience. Entertainers, actors, we're all we're always there to get as much as we can from the audience. And it was grueling at times. But you got to remember that I was by the time I got hired in, I was 19. Could I do it today? Kind of rough. Yeah.
Well, speaking of performing, you are performing here tonight. Can you tell us a little bit about your act for this Puppetzilla Puppet Slam?
Oh, yeah. Jilly, the Queen of Fremont Street. Jilly is a pole dancing marionette that I created about 6 years ago. You know, when you build a marionette, you're never sure how it's going to come out. She just came out beautifully, and I grew into her performances, and she's a hit. She's quite the gal.
How long have you been performing with her?
About 6 years.
6 years, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have different pieces that you can do with her, or is it always kind of the same piece?
No, when I'm in Vegas, I live in Vegas now. I perform downtown on Fremont Street on various weekends, and they have constant music playing. And so the way I perform is that no matter what the music is, I work to it. That's my act. I've learned this over the years, that the way my head rolls, I've always had it there, but I wasn't always showing it to people. And so the past probably 15 years, I started performing that way, where I would, if someone put on classical music, I would perform to it. Or if it was reggae music, I would perform to it. So it's just part of my act, and they do that there very well. They're crisscrossing music all the time, and it's so loud and so crazy. I mean, there's so much going on. There's all this overhead lighting stuff that's going on. And so I have a great time. I enjoyed doing that down there. You know, it's kind of a funny thing. I switched over from performing. Busking?
Yeah.
I never did that. And it wasn't until I moved to Vegas that I said, you know what, let me bring her out on Fremont Street, see what happens. And she turned out to be a major hit. They love me down there. So, of course, you know, if they love me, I got to be there to perform for them, you know?
Exactly. Well, you mentioned before we started chatting for this interview that this is not your first Los Angeles Guild Puppet Slam. You've performed in other ones. Why do you think, as a puppeteer, it's a good thing to perform at these kind of slams?
Oh, it's great because it brings the art form to people that may not have ever seen anything live with puppetry. I mean, they may have seen a lot on TV with the Muppets and so on, but to see it live is a different thing. And so, again, it's spreading the word. You know, we're spreading the word that puppetry's cool and it's fun, and come and see a show because you'll be blown away in what you see.
All right. Well, have a great show, and thanks so much for talking to us.
Thank you very much.
Next, I chatted with ventriloquist Zach Binder about his piece with his comedy partner, Tickle Muff.
Zach, I would love to know your path to puppetry. How did you discover puppets and get you to this point today performing in this Puppet Slam?
Well, I believe when I was growing up, I consumed a lot of media that had puppets in it, so I was primed for that. But the biggest thing was when I was a kid, I used to go to this amusement park in Canada, and there was a ventriloquist there, and I used to see her every summer, and I just thought it was absolute pure magic. And then it kind of left my brain, and then as a teenager, I was depressed and looked in the mirror one time and just tried it, and it came kind of naturally. So ever since then, I've just been practicing.
Excellent. So ventriloquism, that's what you do. Excellent. Because, I don't know, a lot of times at Puppet Slams, there's not a ton of ventriloquism, so this is very exciting. So who is this character that you're performing with tonight? Is it a character you performed with before, or is this a new character? Or?
Yeah, I've performed with her before. I found her through the drag scene in Toronto. She was given to me. She was built to be a mascot for this drag show. And in 2008, someone saw me performing with a puppet, and he said, I have this puppet that's been sitting in a box. And she was so big, and I just fell in love with her. So we started performing in drag together, lip syncing. And then I was like, but I'm a ventriloquist. I should be using that skill. But comedy was scary for me, but I've started doing it recently.
Excellent. And is this the first time you've performed in a Puppet Slam, or have you performed, I know you mentioned the drag shows, but is this the first Puppet Slam, or have you performed in other ones?
This is my first Puppet Slam, but I've been performing in comedy shows around LA.
Right.
Yeah.
And how long of an act do you have with your character?
It runs about 8-9 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So slowly building it up, getting it.
Yeah.
And where do you go to, like, comedy clubs and do open mics or things like that?
Yeah, that's where we work out all of our material is at these open mics.
Yeah.
To prepare for the shows.
Right.
Yeah.
Excellent. And is tonight's, because tonight's the theme is what's your sign? It's astrology. So do you have material geared towards that?
My puppet does some crowd work, and she does ask an audience member what their sign is.
Okay. Well, I'm very excited to watch this, to watch you perform. And what would you say to someone who is like on the fence, like, oh, should I sign up to perform in a puppet slam? I know this is your first one, but what advice would you give them, or would you encourage them to do it? And how do you feel about puppet slams?
I think it's just so cool because there's so few spaces that are just solely geared towards puppeteers. So it feels super cool to be able to be part of something like this. So if you have any interest, anyone out there listening, I would highly recommend. I mean, I've yet to do it, but already it feels so welcoming and exciting to be part of a whole puppet lineup.
Excellent. Well, Zach, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you.
After the slam, I caught up with Esti Baharier to chat about their piece, Sting.
Well, Esti, we are standing outside of the Mayflower Club where we just had the Puppetzilla Puppet Slam, and your piece was fantastic, and I want to ask you some questions about it. But first, I would like to ask, what was sort of your path to puppetry? How did you find puppets?
Yeah, so I studied game design in school and then went into themed entertainment design. So I was working on theme parks, rides, attractions, immersive theater, museum stuff, and there's a lot of overlap with the puppet world. So I kind of saw what was possible and was like, that is what I want to do. And about a year and a half ago, I was watching The Dark Crystal with my little Kermit plush toy, and I had an epiphany that was like, this is a viable career path. I can actually do this. And I frantically went on LinkedIn and saw what connections I had, and it led me to the Bob Baker Marionette Theater. So last summer, I went there, started volunteering, and then got hired as a puppeteer, where I've been puppeteering marionettes for about a year now.
Excellent. What's that experience like? I did one season there, and it was a lot of fun. It was at the old venue, not at the new venue. But
Okay.
yeah, how is it?
I love it. It's a magical place, as anybody who walks in can tell immediately. It's like, I feel like magic is the best way to describe it. Yeah, it's an incredible community, so, like just masterful puppets that I get to play with for a living. So it's incredible.
Excellent. Well, let's talk about this slam. Have you ever done a slam piece before?
Yes, this is my second slam. I did the last slam with Ricky Chavez, who also did a piece tonight and is incredible. And this is my first solo piece. So kind of my first time definitely my first time doing shadow puppetry, my first time doing a solo piece, but not my first slam.
Working with marionettes at the Bob Baker Marionette Theater, and then this was, as you said, a shadow piece. When you were putting this piece together, was it always going to be a shadow piece, or were you thinking like, oh, should I do this with marionettes because I'm so used to them, or what was the decision to make it shadows?
Well, I can't make marionettes because they take like 300 hours to make. So I definitely was thinking about doing something kind of in like Bunraku style. I love experimental puppetry and objects that come to life. So I was kind of thinking about that. And then I found out my friend had an overhead projector and I wanted to play around with that. And then the idea just kind of like came out of that. It was all the pieces came together and I decided to do shadow puppetry. I think as I was making it all and just figuring out how to even fabricate these pieces, a lot of my marionette experience came in, a lot of like inspiration from past puppet slams and other puppeteers I know came in, and it all just kind of came together. And I think puppets are amazing because they can be anything. And so figuring this out in shadow puppetry form, I was able to draw upon my experience with marionettes, and I volunteer at an art studio and like inspiration from other puppeteers.
Excellent. Well, what I loved was, and I don't want to give too much away because I want people to seek this out, to see it, because it'll be a lot of fun. But it's called Sting, right? And it's about, not giving too much away, but it's about a scorpion. And so what was the decision to make sort of, I mean, you kind of mentioned it in the thing, this unlikable, to some people, lead character and really make it emotional?
As a Scorpio, I feel misunderstood sometimes. It can be very intense. I really drew upon my knowledge on astrology. I'm actually a triple Scorpio, so I really, really relate. And I think people get scared by intensity. It's a very intense, kind of heavy piece, and it forces people to confront themselves, which is terrifying. And so I wanted to lean into that. And the scorpion is like the perfect animal that people are terrified of, but they're so cool. There's like so many different types of them. They're actually one of the coolest animals.
Well, I mean, this was great. I was sitting towards kind of close to the back, and there was someone who works here at the Mayflower Club sitting, and your comic timing in the piece was just so great. And I don't want to give anything away, but there's some great comedic moments in there. But you do, as you said, it tells like a serious message. And so do you find that you love putting the comedy in to kind of get the message across?
Yeah, I think life would be unbearable without humor. I actually usually lean towards the side of humor because it's more comfortable. And this was definitely a challenge to really be vulnerable and not just rely on humor. Obviously, like there's some funny moments, but to not just rely on like landing on a joke.
Excellent. Well, this was your first solo piece, as you said. Are you looking forward to doing more solo pieces in the future?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I love to collaborate with people. I think it just creates a better process when you're not sitting alone in your room. But I definitely have more ideas. I think this was a huge first step, and I'm really excited to see what comes from it.
Well, it was a great piece, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here.
And finally, I sat down with Puppetzilla Puppet Slam producer Christine Papalexis to get her thoughts on this slam and what makes a successful slam in general. Christine, it's a pleasure to have you back on the show, and I'm so excited to talk to you about this recent Puppetzilla Puppet Slam, which was just a huge success. But I wanted to kind of start a little bit at the beginning. For as long as I've known you, you've been involved with the Puppet Slams that happen through the Los Angeles Guild of Puppetry, and you are the producer of this slam. So how long have you been producing the Puppetzilla Puppet Slam?
So we first started doing Puppet Slams like in 2003 and 2004, somewhere around in there. A place called Zen Sushi. And it was basically a restaurant. We had a little stage and it was very kind of intimate, and we had a few acts, and it was great. People absolutely loved it. And then I can't remember kind of how the evolution of it was, but in 2011, the Guild got its first grant from the Puppet Slam Network. Heather Henson's company or nonprofit, she offers some money for people to put on puppet slams across the country, and actually also in Canada, and I think in Puerto Rico too. I think there's puppet slams in many places. 2011 was the first one that I started doing on a regular basis. So we've been doing them yearly since then. We do usually 3 puppet slams a year, and we came up with the name Puppetzilla Puppet Slam because we thought, we're in Hollywood, it's sort of a Godzilla thing. I don't know. Someone came up with it and we thought, that's good.
Excellent. Well, this slam, usually the slams have a theme, and this slam, the theme was astrology, what's your sign? And I know that some of them, like, if they happen around Halloween or they happen around St. Patrick's Day, you kind of go with that theme. But how do you come up with the themes for the slams?
Usually it's something that we just talk about in a meeting, and, it's like, all right, who's got an idea for a theme? And someone came up with astrology, and we thought, oh, that's a great idea, because there's so many different ways you can go with that. I think for puppeteers that are like creating new work that they haven't done before, sometimes it's really helpful to have a theme, to have a prompt, to have something to kind of jump off of to create a new act. And I think astrology turned out to be a really good one, because there were some beautiful acts that were based on in astrology. Our next one is going to be Halloween, because it's going to be on October 21st. So we thought, Halloween is an obvious theme, and people like to dress up, and we always have a costume contest. But if people don't have an idea for the, to stick with the theme, like astrology, then we, if I have room, then I'll take it anyway. It's fine. It's a slam. So there's a certain amount of leeway that you can give to an evening of short puppet acts.
Estee's piece, which I loved, her shadow piece that she did about the scorpion. I didn't interview her until after the slam was over, and she said she was like, "Oh well, I thought this was great because I'm a Scorpio," and I was like, "Oh, of course, that's how it fits in with the, you know what I mean?" Because it was just a great piece, and then it was like, "Oh, it fits perfectly with the theme because it was about a scorpion."
Yeah, sometimes people really need to have a prompt to kind of figure out something they can, something that they're working on. It's funny, that was only her second time, I think her second time performing in her first solo piece. And it was really wonderful and really well received. And it was very, very personal. And you have to really kind of open up and, pour your heart into it, even for a 5-minute puppet piece.
Yeah, it was really great. I hope that I think I told her I hope she gets to perform it elsewhere so that other people can see it because I thought it was really great. Another thing that I thought was unique about this slam that you don't normally see at puppet slams is that there were not one but two ventriloquist acts, and they were fantastic, and I loved seeing them. So when you open the door to acts, you're really inviting the whole puppetry community.
Yeah, it's funny because I don't know that many ventriloquists, but years ago when we first started doing slams, and I asked my friend Robin Sims if she knew of anybody because we're looking for some comedy acts to kind of fill out the evening. This is years ago. And she said, "Oh my God, you have to meet my friend Carl Herlinger because he is a genius." I'm like, well, okay, ventriloquists, okay, they're not really usually my cup of tea, but he performed at. Oh my God. I told him, I said, if he wants to perform in every slam, I'll always have him because he's that good. And he always comes up with new material, which is also fantastic because not everybody is able to, to be that facile to come up with new things every few months. So he's amazing. And he's a unique kind of ventriloquist because he also is just incredibly gifted and clever and funny. He also performed in the National Puppet Slam, which happens every year in Atlanta. He was somebody that I recommended to be in the National Slam, and they don't choose everybody, but he was chosen and went to Atlanta and represented LA and was much beloved there as much as we love him. And then the other ventriloquist, Zach Binder, who's a new person in our community, just met him recently. And yeah, a completely different kind of ventriloquist, a huge, big, kind of grotesque, wonderful looking puppet, and just did a really funny act and, kind of played with the audience. And it was really nice to have the two of them. So, but, ventriloquism is more popular than you might think, because I think there's been 3 winners of America's Got Talent that were ventriloquists. Reality is there are these people that are, they're doing what they love and they do it really well. And then they are, actually the world is loving them. So there's room for ventriloquists in this world.
Yeah, in asking that question, I just kind of meant like sometimes in puppetry communities, it's a little bit like, oh, but, for years, I was a comedy musician, and I would walk into a comedy club with my guitar, and I would get visible eye rolls from the other comedians, like, oh, if he didn't have a guitar, he wouldn't have an act. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of sometimes in the puppetry world, ventriloquists are like, oh boy, here comes a ventriloquist. But both ventriloquists on this show were absolutely fantastic. I also. We've talked about on this podcast before how slams are just a great place to kind of get your chops and to work on your puppetry and to try something out, to experiment maybe in a new form of puppetry that you haven't done before. But what I found, especially with this slam, was as an audience member, this was a really great place to meet other puppeteers that I didn't know, because I think I only knew maybe 2 of the acts and was maybe familiar with one of the other acts, but had never met them before. And everyone was fantastic. And it was such a great place to meet other puppeteers.
It's true. We're kind of post-pandemic world, right? And people are still figuring out, like, I really want to go out and do something fun, and puppets are awesome. And so our audiences have gotten bigger. as well as the people on stage have gotten bigger. And the guild itself has really opened up to a lot more people, a lot of young people that are showing up that I'm like, I don't even know how they're finding out about the guild, but they're showing up to things, and it's really exciting. It's exciting that our community is really expanding, and that people are really embracing live puppetry, live puppet theater. So yeah.
You've hosted a few slams in your time working with the slam, and what qualities do you think make a good slam host?
I usually don't host. I kind of like, I'm like the extra sort of host where I'll come in and then introduce the host and then introduce the raffle and introduce this. And then, so I'm usually not like the main host, but I do like, I do like kind of being up on the stage. It's fun. A good host, it's really interesting because we've had a variety of hosts. I find that when someone is kind of within the puppet community and they understand puppetry, they add so much more to the whole evening, because they can actually comment on what was really wonderful about that act. And then they also often know the people who are performing, and it can add a lot. And then a good host, though, also needs to be somebody who's quick on their feet. It's sort of like a comedy host, in a way. It's very much like a stand-up kind of situation where it's really great if somebody can work the crowd and it has some bits that they've got in their back pocket, especially because with puppetry, they have to fill time sometimes. If somebody has to move a huge set on and plug things in, and that's what's very different with puppetry than comedy, because you actually have to have a very thorough tech rehearsal, because a lot of puppet acts have a stage, a shadow puppet thing, a table, a projector, and balloons, who knows what, there's always a lot of things that need to be set up. So it takes a good tech rehearsal, and it takes a really good host that's able to kind of like think quickly and be able to kind of keep everything flowing nicely, without being pushy or obnoxious.
And speaking of tech, let's talk about your great crew that you had helping put this whole thing together and running the tech rehearsal and all that kind of stuff, because the show would not have happened without them.
Oh my God. It's amazing. I mean, like I said, when we started, we did it at a restaurant and we didn't really have much tech at all. And then over the years, we've developed. It's a pretty tech-heavy event, and we have the theater for like 6 hours. We started at 4:00. Well, we have the amazing Rachel Burson, who has been our stage manager for several years. In addition to being president of the guild, she also has been. She went to school to be a stage manager, and she's incredible. So we absolutely couldn't do it without her. And Calvin, who's our tech guru. He sits up in the booth and makes sure that all the sound, all the sound cues are working, the light cues are working. And then there's this guy, Dave, who actually works for the theater, and he helps with spotlight. And before we even start the show, there's all the cords to get plugged in, and I don't even know what all they are. There's a little projector that we use to show films. Sometimes we usually have some films that are kind of interspersed in the evening. But that has to also, we have to run a cord upstairs to the booth so that we can play the films. There's so much tech stuff that has to happen before the show even starts. And so we also have Adrienne Rose Leonard, she's a brilliant puppeteer, and she also is brilliant at tech stuff because she's also a drummer. So she's been around, chords and microphones and stuff since she was born practically. So she's great with doing all that stagehand kind of stuff and helping get everything set up. And then we also have other people that are involved in documenting it, because one of the things for the grant that we get through the Puppet Slam Network, one of the requirements of the grant is that we have to have really good still photography. So we have this person who's on the board, one of our board members, Jay Goldstruck, who is a fantastic photographer, and they have been doing it now just for a year or two. So then Jay takes all the photographs and then puts them into a Google Doc, and because there's all that stuff you have to do after you do the photographs. then there's all the stuff you have to do with it afterwards, with, selecting and figuring things out and editing and all that. So Ricky Chavez, who also performed, he's like a professional videographer. So he had like 2 cameras set up. He had a good friend of his came and helped run the cameras so that Ricky could perform. And now he's taking all the footage and he's giving it to the individual performers so that they have footage of their own act. And he's putting it together so that the guild has a really nice video that we can use for whatever purposes. We usually put it up on YouTube so that people can see the slam afterwards. And then of course there's Taylor, she's the co-president. And then there's Ross Hajduk, who is a really fun hand puppeteer, but he also is the guild's treasurer. So he's kind of become the box office person. But it's surprising. One of the biggest things we have to deal with at the Mayflower, which is a fabulous location, but we have to set up chairs for every show, and we have to put them all away. And it sounds like, oh, chairs, what's the big deal? But when you have to set up 120 plus chairs, it's amazing how much work that is.
Yeah, and one other person who I want to make sure that we mention as well was the incredible musician that you had for the show too.
Michael Mortilla he's a genius. He's been a pianist for, I don't know, decades. He actually worked with Martha Graham. So he's been around for a really long time, but he's incredible because he can like improv with a performance. He can improv with our host, and Perry Daniel was our host for this show. And she was so wonderful and so delightful. She's never hosted before, but she's an actor and a puppeteer and a teacher at UCLA. And I thought she just did a wonderful job with really bringing delight to the theme. And she's really terrific. And she's co-president of the guild right now with Taylor Bebot. But Michael, he also, he loves doing our slam, which is so wonderful because he's like the best at what he does. He actually, he's been doing these shows at the Academy recently. They show silent films, and he will perform on the piano with the silent film, like as it's happening. It's not like there's music written out for him. He's like improvs through the whole thing. He's just a genius. And he gets very excited. He has wonderful technology. Like he'll bring in a different synthesizer for Halloween. He's like, I'm so excited. I've got this new speaker that I can't wait for you to hear. It's really, really great. And he brings in different sound effects and all kinds of things. So yeah, we're really, really lucky to have him. It's really fun.
What advice do you have for someone who wants to produce a puppet slam, maybe for the first time? What's your go-to piece of advice to tell them?
Get a lot of help and and plan early. One of the reasons I love doing this so much is I love providing a space for people to perform. And puppetry is such a wonderful variety of expression. I mean, like in the show the other night, we had overhead projectors of shadows. We had the 2 fish in the beginning, the Pisces act, and these fish they're like 4 or 5 feet long, and they just they were like lit from the inside, and they were so beautiful, so spectacular. And I've never seen anything quite like them. And they were manipulated like throughout the entire room. These 2 fish, they were like dancing together. And then we had hand puppets, and we had a marionette act, and we had, it's a wonderful variety. Which I think is one of the strengths of doing a puppet slam. It makes it challenging to find a good space, which is why the Mayflower is also good, because there's a raised stage. So even you can actually even see marionettes. If you're working in a space where you're sitting on the floor and then the stage is the same height as the floor, then you can't see marionettes. You can't see things that are like, below waist level. So the Mayflower is really perfect for that. Try and find a variety of acts, prepare like crazy, make sure you have all the tech information, and get the word out early so that people know about the show. And make sure you have a lot of help. Like I said, I have this whole list of people that I rely on every time. If they're, and if someone's not available, of course, we'll pull in someone else. But it goes smoothly because these people all, they know what they're doing. Rachel is there doing being the stage manager every time. And, we can totally rely on everybody.
Well, looking back at the slam, which was just a fantastic evening, and I'm not forcing you to pick among all the amazing acts, because all the acts were amazing. But what were some of your favorite moments from this recent slam?
You want to have a nice flow to the evening so that you take the audience on a journey. It's like, okay, there's two fish. Okay, well, that sounds good. It's Pisces. Kelsey Cato, who was the main creator of the act. I thought, I know that he's a good puppeteer. He's a creative. I thought, I'll bet his act will be good as an opener. And hearing the audience kind of ooh and ah, and it just created this wonderful feeling in the whole room where everybody was just enchanted by these two fish. And there was a bit of a story. It wasn't a really huge story. It was a small, intimate story. And it was just enough that you just fell in love with this moment. So that's really great. I can't even think what else. So many moments. You know what else I really love? This young guy from Romania.
Raresh.
Yeah, Raresh. Yeah. He's one of Perry's students at UCLA. He's like a physicist. He has like a science mind. And he's delightful. He's so much fun. And Perry got him he took Perry's class. I'm not even sure how that happened because she teaches theater. And he took her class and he decided he really wanted to create a puppet show kind of based on he created some techniques with how the puppet worked. And of course, the story was about Newton's apple. But it was his first time performing. And it was just delightful. It was so beautiful. So I love those moments. I love when those things happen where we get to see somebody do something for the first time and enjoy the beauty of puppetry.
Yeah, his piece too it had all these great moments where like you could hear the audience go, oh, and like for somebody who it's like, oh yeah, this is my first puppet show. You're like, wow, I can't wait to see your second and third and fourth because you have so many great wow moments in this thing, Yeah, it was a fantastic show, and I don't know if on paper it was a sellout, but it looked very close. It looked standing room only to me.
Yeah, we sold more tickets in advance than we've ever sold. We sold like 120 something in advance, and then there was, I don't know, then there were a bunch of walk-ups after that. I can't remember what the final tally was, but yeah, it was. And in fact, I was concerned that people in the back would not be able to see because some of the puppets are not huge. But the people I talked to, they were like, oh yeah, we stood in the back, but it was fine. It was really fun. And we had a great time. So I guess there's something really fun about having a big crowd too. People enjoy being in a space together. I think especially, like I said, it's like post-pandemic, it just has a nice, I think people want to be together and see live theater.
Well, Christine, it was an amazing evening. I had so much fun, and just thank you for taking the time to talk to us here today on the show about it.
Sure, my pleasure. And thank you so much for spotlighting the Puppet Slams, because it's such a wonderful opportunity for people to work on new work, to do, to just express what they love in puppetry. And a lot of people don't know that Puppet Slams exist. I mean, I've had friends that are not in the puppet community, and they'll come to a Puppet Slam and they're like, I had no idea that was a puppet. I had no idea that all these things could be puppets. And it's wonderful that the Puppet Slams exist. And I appreciate you spotlighting it so that we get the word out and more people come.
Many thanks to Christine Papalexis and the incredible performers that I spoke to from the Astrology What's Your Sign Puppetzilla Puppet Slam. For social media links to all the folks I talked to, visit the show notes for this episode, episode number 87, over at underthepuppet.com. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Under the Puppet. I want to send a special thank you out to all the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who help make this show possible. Patreon patrons at the producer level and above who get a special shout out are Eve Cunning, Kathy Crawford, Tony Urbano, Brandy, David Akers, Paul, Scott Armstrong, and Vicky Sebring. To become a patron, visit patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media. And thank you for your support. If you have questions, suggestions, or feedback about the show, call our voicemail line at 818-806-9604 or click the Call the Show button in the free Under the Puppet app for iOS and Android. You can also send your feedback via email to underthepuppet@gmail.com, or you can connect with the show on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter by searching for Under the Puppet. And don't forget to tell a friend about the show. Thank you so much for listening. This episode of Under the Puppet was edited by Steven Staver and features music by Dan Ring. Help spread the word of Under the Puppet by sharing your favorite episode with a friend. Under the Puppet is copyright 2023 Saturday Morning Media Grant Pachoco executive producer, all rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com.
Under the Puppet proudly presents The Adventures of Timmy the Tooth Reunion. In this almost 90-minute video, you will hear great stories from the cast and crew who brought this amazing puppet show to life. Plus, you'll see never-before-seen artwork and exclusive behind-the-scenes video. Under the Puppet's Timmy the Tooth Reunion is available right now at timmy.underthepuppet.com. You've been listening to Saturday Morning Media. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.